squad, I'm gonna get mine. Go do the crime if you can't do the time. Don't tell me how you're up and down. When you smile in my face, but you play me like a clown. It's your fool, bitch, so just step back. I'm mad that when I come down straight, I thought you were my piece, but you play me out. Now I'm mad as hell, and I'm full of doubt. Who you wanna roll with? Who you wanna roll with? Lefty, let's roll. Who you wanna roll with? Who you wanna roll with? Lefty, let's roll. I'm back on the scene, it's time to get mean. I'm a lean revolution machine. For what people stay, they sway. For today is good as any day. Y'all feel slightly this, let's resist. Raise your fist and pump like this. Promises all the time. Don't cross the line, and you know it's mine. Who you wanna roll with? Who you wanna roll with? Lefty, let's roll. Who you wanna roll with? Who you wanna roll with? Lefty, let's roll.
All right, it's Thursday. Hold on a second now. Let me fix the audio. You're going to hear an echo for a second. Get that out of there. Cool. And there's Captain Jason Straw. There he is. Hey, Jason Straw, how are you, buddy? Good to see you. Can you hear me okay? I can't hear you. Oh, hold on. Hold on. I'm not hearing you. Did I do something wrong? Hold on. I might have did something wrong here. It's usually me. Hey, Bear, can I hear you? Bear, are you there? Can you hear me, Bear? Uh-oh. Maybe I have issues. Bear's not even there. How about this one? Okay, I think this one's working. I have a second one for you. Can you see and hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, I have you here twice on my screen. It's kind of weird. One is video and one is audio. You're actually listed twice on my screen. It's wild. Can you try to log back in? Can you maybe
Yeah, I can try to.
I think that's the problem, because it's yeah. That was weird. Bear, can you hear me okay? All right, we're gonna wait a few minutes for Captain Straw. This is okay. Let's try it again.
Is that better?
There we go. I got you now. Thank you. What's going on, Captain Straw? How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Just turned 51 yesterday.
Wow, happy
So-
birthday.
Well, thank you.
You have an amazing resume here. You served as a combat medic, EMT in the 82nd Airborne, the famous 82nd Airborne, the Indiana National Guard medic, Indiana University bone marrow transplant student, nurse, registered nurse after graduation, serving in the Air Force for 8 years before retirement. You started at it. Here's a kicker in Indiana. How tough was it advocating in Indiana for medical cannabis? That's pretty tough, huh?
It is. We made some good strides, but it just never came to fruition. Tough state.
It really is. Where is it at right now in Indiana with cannabis?
Well, they're talking about it for the campaign, which is what they do every campaign, is that the leaders want to move forward. But the last time I was at the State House about 2 years ago, we had about 40% of the Republicans supporting, and they make up the supermajority throughout the government. 100% in the judicial, 100% in the executive branch. It was like 86% in the Senate and like 76% in the House. And but it only takes one legislator to kill the bill, and that's the problem. We'd always get the one person who is in charge of the committee, and they just kill it, even though you have unanimous support in the House, and you had probably enough support in the Senate to get it onto the floor and heard. But the leadership is not on board, and that's where we run into our battles. And through the years, I've been advocating since 2016 at the State House, and we've made some great strides. We got hemp CBD, the whole hemp. Before the federal government, before President Donald Trump signed the bill in December, we had it legalized in Indiana. And they always say, we won't legalize before the federal government. And they did. They did for hemp. They still considered hemp a Schedule 1 at that time. But we got it through because everybody came together under a united umbrella, which the legislators would say, we're not going to allow you to advocate if you're a medical marijuana or recreational for hemp. They're like, no, you're separate. These different groups can't advocate together. So we didn't have any unity, but it took 2 years of me working with the groups to get the people united together to say the politicians are trying to separate you and divide you so that you don't have a voice. You don't have power because you have power in numbers. And when we were united in 2018, that's when they passed Senate Bill 52, which legalized hemp. And then everybody went their own ways. They're like, no, we're not going to fight anymore for medical or recreational. We got what we want. So the hemp people went their way. The medical people went their way. The rec people went their way. And they all started fighting again. Well, then the hemp people in Indiana lost hemp flower because the state prosecutors, the county prosecutors, and the state police said, oh, we can't tell the difference between hemp flower and marijuana flower. Well, they didn't want to pay for the testing. They said it cost too much money because they didn't have the ability to test it at that time. They had to send it out of state. So it cost a lot when you send it out of state. So we ended up, Indiana lost hemp flower, and the Midwest Hemp Council sued, won, but the judge didn't write the order and the explanation right. She put it all together instead of dividing by two and signing both. So it went to the appellate court. Curtis Hill, Attorney General Curtis Hill, and Governor Holcomb pushed, and the appellate court said, well, on technicality, the judge needs to fix it to be in compliance with federal regulations, and it's still federally legal, but the problem was the judge, they gave her 6 months. It literally had taken her secretary probably a minute or two, and then just a signature from her. which is just an electronic click. So it would have taken less than 5 minutes to fix the problem. 6 months later, she doesn't. So Indiana still, it's illegal to possess hemp flower in Indiana, even though it's federally legal. So that's been kind of our battle in Indiana, is just technicalities, and even though federal law has changed, Indiana still keeps things illegal because of red tape.
Well, New Jersey's regulating hemp now, so all the patients who are getting their hemp, their Delta 8 and their Delta 10 from the gas stations, they can't no longer do that, and
Well,
you can't grow it in New Jersey for that reason. You have to import it from out of the state. Like there's a loophole where out of state farmers can still sell their hemp, but New Jersey farmers can't sell the hemp. It's a weird loophole.
yeah, so I don't have a problem with regulation because my wife Shelley, she had a hemp business and she provided the certificate of analysis, and when they investigated the hemp in Indiana, in her hometown area, the hemp CBD, it would say 1,000 on the bottle, and they would have 400 or 500 actually in the bottle when they tested it. So they're not. A lot of the companies that are popping up, they're not selling people good product. So it's either way under, or there's even none. I mean, they tested some products and there's no CBD in it, none whatsoever. So I don't have a problem with states testing. California, for the first time last year, tested the products just to see if they were within regulation, and there were contaminants in it. So, there'd be mercury, cadmium, all these things that we're not supposed to consume, along with pesticides and bacteria and fungus. And the state, for 30 years, almost 30 years, because 1996 is when they legalized, they had it, but they weren't testing and regulating the product for the benefit of the people. So Michigan had the same problem when we were there. They found that there was a fungus in it, Aspergillus, and it was causing people to get sick. So the state regulatory followed the law. They pulled all the cannabis products that were contaminated off the shelf or could be contaminated. And then the company sued, and the judge said, well, they want to sell it and people want to buy it, they can. And one of the casualties was Shelley's son. He was sick for months. He was, I think, 29 at the time, and he had symptoms of congestive heart failure. His legs swelled up. He couldn't get into his work boots. He was a construction worker. He couldn't work. He was at our house for a week, and the only thing that helped him was the Gorilla Glue 4 that Shelley and I grew. He smoked the whole half-pound in that week, just trying to recover and take a little food in and water. But it took him probably about 6 months to fully recover. And so we know firsthand why there has to be regulation or home grow. So if it's sold on the market, just like anything else, it should be regulated and tested, just like an apple or a tomato, or eggs or dairy. I mean, they have recalls for contaminated dairy products and contaminated eggs and vegetables that make people sick. So they call it back and they get rid of it. And that's for our safety. That's the main job of the government, is to make sure that what's sold out there is safe for us. Whatever we grow, government doesn't get involved with it. They should allow home grow, so that people can know what's in their product and use what they are willing, what they're willing to risk. So if they want to use certain pesticides or nutrients, and if you grow it at home, just like you have a home garden, it's up to you what you put into it. But if it's being sold to us, it should be safe and regulated, and we should know what's in it. And but that's some of the stuff that me and my wife were fighting for. Was, first off, to make it legal so people can get it. Second is home grow. So if you have the time and want to grow it, you can. And Third is the regulation to make it safe, because we were both critical care nurses. I've been in healthcare 30 years this October. And I'll tell you, I've seen stuff that should be regulated that hasn't, and people gotten sick. Even, people talk about how dangerous cannabis is. There are some things that need to be addressed when you're taking it, such as very high THC amounts for extended period of times can cause cannabis hyperemesis. And the only way to treat that is, one, to stop using cannabis, because you've abused it and your body now is misregulating the endocannabinoid system. So you have to stop the cannabis use to break the cycle of the vomiting. And but that gets back to some of the problems that Shelley had in 2022 in the spring. Shelley became sick. I was in Michigan, she was in Indiana, taking care of some things, and she started having cyclic vomiting. Well, she was prescribed Marinol, which is a synthetic Delta 9, which has been legal since 1985 through the FDA. And she'd been on it for about 5-6 years at that time. And she went to the hospital to get rehydrated and get electrolytes replaced for her vomiting and emesis. And they rehydrated her, they gave her some electrolytes, and they said, hey, we'd like to hold you overnight. And just to observe you. So they did. And in that time, they refused to give her the Marinol prescription. It's the only medication in that class that's approved in the United States. And it was the administrator, the top administrator in the hospital system, that said, I don't like that class of medication, so we're not going to prescribe it for anybody, even though it's approved for cancer patients and AIDS patients, and it's being used now for pain and nausea patients. And what happened was Shelley spent 3 days, and she got worse, and her vital signs were getting worse, her labs were getting worse, and they kept replacing. She had bruises and burns from the potassium IV in her arms, all up and down her hands, her arms. She was miserable. They were looking at moving her to the ICU into critical condition, from observation to critical. And she called me, and I told her, call your doctor, have them write a prescription, I'll pick it up. So I drove down from Michigan about 2 hours, fought with the pharmacy for about 2 hours to get the Marinol. And then I got it to the hospital. She took some. And then they came in, they finally like, oh, okay, since a doctor in our system is prescribing it for you, our doctor here is gonna give you a dose. So she had 15 milligrams of Marinol. And within a half hour, 45 minutes, she was up, walking around, no nausea, her electrolytes balanced out, everything looked good. And then they were trying to get her to eat the whole time. And then they said, well, you got to be NPO. Well, you know what happens when you take cannabis products? You get the munchies because your blood sugar drops. You need to replace the sugar. So essentially what they did is they allowed her to get treatment and get better, but then they tried to cause her further harm by not allowing her to self-regulate her food intake. But within 16 hours of taking the Marinol, she was back home. Well, unbeknownst to us, at that time she would have had probably stage 3 cervical cancer. If they would have focused on her health instead of fighting about a medication, it's like, oh, we don't want this medication. They weren't looking at her health. They weren't looking at her. They were looking at what she was taking to treat her health. Well, fast forward a year, in April of 2023, Shelley's dad had died of stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Diagnosis to death was less than 4 weeks. And in April, she got diagnosed as stage 4 cervical cancer. And the problem was, even in Michigan, the healthcare community is not on board with medical cannabis, even though it's been legalized since 2008. So it's been 12, 16 years, 15, 16 years by the time Shelley was diagnosed. And her OBGYN surgical oncologist was on board with it. We used turkey tail mushrooms, which have been used in Japan for 50 years to help with the cisplatinum, very effective. We went to a vegan diet, no dairy, no meat. We added supplements, which her integrative health physician recommended, which she didn't have any problems with her kidneys or liver or heart. She was worried about losing her hair. Her nails and her hair actually grew in thicker during the chemo and radiation. We did the cannabinoids. We had Keith Johnson, who is a biochem engineer from Purdue, who worked with Mark Davison, and he was giving her CBG, which is very effective against cancer, and then CBD, and then we were taking the Gorilla Glue #4. Her friends up in Michigan, the patient caregivers, provided some for her, and I made her chocolates. So she had herbs such as turmeric and ginger and cinnamon and nutmeg in a dark chocolate with the cannabis oil that we made along with the CBD. So we ended up in July, when they did her review, she had no cancer. It went from the size of a Coke can, a 12-ounce Coke can, to there was this necrotic mass that was the size of a large walnut. And that was it. They couldn't find any active cancer. Well, she ended up getting blood clots, and the vascular surgeon treated her, opened up the blood vessel, put a stent in, and then they didn't get her on blood thinners. They gave her blood thinners to leave the hospital for 2 weeks, follow up with the vascular surgeon. They wouldn't provide blood thinners, which you have to have blood thinners. That's a national standard, is you treat blood clots with blood thinners. And I talked to him about her cannabis use, and we were doing vegan and plants. And he said, "Oh, well, a lot of these we can't do that with." And he said, "So we can't do Coumadin with that." So they went with one that fit. But when we went back, the doctor's like, vascular's like, "Well, no, I don't want to deal with you. I'm done. Your OBGYN surgical oncologist can manage your clot regimen." Well, that's not her specialty. She was uncomfortable because Shelley was a very complex patient, and so the vascular surgeon saw her again. It's like, well, okay, you need another treatment, cancer treatment, to make sure you're good. So they put in us, because they were going to do a surgery to remove her uterus and cervix so that the cancer couldn't come back. So they put in a inferior vena cava filter, IVC, and then he's like, "I'm done." He wouldn't answer our questions, and she ended up, we ran out of blood thinners, and we ended up back in the hospital. She had diffuse blood clots throughout her calf, on her left leg. They put her on a heparin drip. They got her treated. Then she got blood clots again later because we couldn't get the blood thinners, and we were in, and the doctor told us, they said, she's too complex of a patient. I said, to treat here. I said, well, I have the protocols from the national government, because I used to teach critical care doctors when I was in the military, and I created programs and did policies towards the end of my career. And I said, well, here they are. And they're like, no, you don't understand. She's too complex of a patient for our level 1 trauma center to treat. And level 1 trauma center is supposed to be the top. They're supposed to be the best. And so I ended up having to look to see where I could go. Well, since she's a medical marijuana patient, I'm retired military. I could have taken her on base and got her great care, and the doctors and administrators who listened to me. A lot of them, where I was looking at taking her, I trained them. I trained the colonels who are now there in charge. And when you ask them, well, could she use her marijuana? And they're like, well, it's federally illegal. It's a Schedule 1, so no. So I couldn't take her there because she needed that and she needed the healthcare. So when we looked all around, the only place we could find was down in Covington, Louisiana, which is where her brother is. Marijuana is legal medically. So we got her down there. Her brother and sister-in-law helped. Um, we got her into the healthcare system. They told her she could take her medical cannabis, but she was just, it was too much. It was too little, too late. So by the time they got down there and they started figure out what she needed, they just didn't have time to save her. So because of the delays, because of the discrimination by healthcare professionals, even in a state that's been legalized for 15, 16 years medically, it, the 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 healthcare professionals are ignorant about cannabis and they discriminate against cannabis users and they don't realize that cannabis is a medicine. And that's something that Shelley and I, we did educational programs. I went to the Indiana State Nurses Association. I did cannabis and pharmacokinetics, the interactions, and we were supposed to do a presentation to the graduate nurse practitioners, but COVID hit and Governor Holcomb shut down the state, so that died. We were supposed to go to Eskenazi and educate the entire hospital system, the attorneys, the administrators, the healthcare professionals. That got shut down. When things started getting back up and running, we did cannabis as a harm reduction tool for addiction. They found that CBD was 100% effective in managing delirium tremors for alcoholics. Delirium tremors can kill you. And the best treatment option we have right now are benzos, like Valium and Ativan. And those things help calm the nervous system, but you become addicted and it's a very difficult drug to come off. But they're not deadly. It just takes longer and it's harder than alcohol. And so we did a whole presentation on that and they liked our presentation, but and they wanted to invest in Shelley's company, but that's not what we were looking for. We were looking to do more education and we've done it. We've done a lot of educating. Shelley had brochures, the endocannabinoid system and one on the endocannabinoid system, one on the endocannabinoid system deficiencies. And a lot of the chronic illnesses that we're seeing are from deficiencies in the endocannabinoid system. And so there are other ways besides cannabis to boost your endocannabinoid system. Omega-3s, which you can find in flax, fish oil, walnuts. So there's other plants that have stuff that helps boost our endocannabinoid system. And when I see you guys smoking and stuff, I'm very lightweight. So when you smoke, your liver processes it into like delta 11, and from delta 9 to 11, and the delta 11 is like 10 times more potent than the delta 9. So when you get that liver pass, if your liver is healthy, usually if you're taking vitamin D, magnesium, and B vitamins, that supports your liver in processing toxins and medications. So your body can then convert the delta 9 to a more potent substance and you get high quicker, so you need less of it. So I can get high on 1 to 5 milligrams of THC because I'm well nourished, I'm in good health, and my liver processes it well. Shelley was taking up to 400 milligrams of THC at a time, and when I got her on the supplements, she dropped down to 50 to 100. So your health and your nutritional status affects your high and affects the quality of the response of your body to the cannabinoids. And there's the terpenes and flavonoids that interact and tone down the high or or boost the effect. But one of the problems I see with recreational is that when you, like in Michigan, when you got recreational, then they started raising the levels of THC. And if you're looking for medical, you want kind of that somewhere between probably 8 to 20%. That because you want the other cannabinoids and terpenes. Caryophyllene was one of the terpenes that beta caryophyllene that was given to my wife to help treat her cancer. It's a very effective medicinal terpene. So so these things have to be looked at and researched so that we know what the best combinations are. There's a pharmaceutical company out in California that's actually working on blends of cannabinoids and terpenes for different medical conditions. I reversed my stage 3 chronic kidney disease by low protein diet, making sure I'm hydrated, and hemp CBD and medical marijuana. I actually have normal lab values now from my diet changes and adding cannabis. So it's very beneficial to for your health, and it's a matter of the researchers figuring it out. When I went to Florida to the CannaMed 24, Professor Dr. Ethan Russo was there, and he presented, and Dr. Dustin Sulak, and I learned so much. I learned so much the from the researchers and the presenters about how these things work and the research that they're doing so they can move things forward. The problem is our government and the healthcare professionals are not looking at it. They're not ready to integrate. And they've known about the endocannabinoid system since 1992, which is when I graduated high school. And I know it takes 5 to 10 years for something to get into the college curriculum once it's accepted. And there are a few colleges that are starting to implement these research programs. The University of Maryland's one of them. Michigan has one in the northern part of the state.
Stanford as well.
Stanford?
Yeah, here in New Jersey.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're starting to, but I think
Rutgers as well. Rutgers DO medical program. My sister's a DO here in the state of New Jersey as a cardiologist, and her fellowship program did have as well teachings in regards to the endocannabinoid system and regards to using it as a medicine instead of silently saying, yeah, it kind of helps. You know what I mean? So it's definitely
Yeah.
out there. The information's out there as far as doctors learning it. Now, as far as them being accredited for it being learned about, no, just, you know, my sister's a DO. She's not an MD, so she does the osteopathic part, and that's where that chimes into it. You know what I mean?
I do. It's Chili's doctor friend, Dr. Varula, uses hemp CBD and Marinol for Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's, and he said some phenomenal results with those patients. There was a neurologist out in California who did CAT scans before and after, and one of her patients was a prominent professor, and he had declined to the point where all he did was pretty much sit in his chair. And then she treated him on this regimen that she had of cannabinoids and other nutritional supplements. And he went from pretty much being vegetated in a chair to back to swimming, having conversations with students about the stuff that he used to teach. And she had her whole line, and the federal government went after her. The FDA went after her and shut her down because they said, you cannot talk about the medical benefits of your cannabis products. She said, but I'm a doctor. This is the clinical evidence. It's a research. And they said, we don't care. So when the federal government has somebody that has proof, and they have CT scans, and they have labs, and they have the before and after, and they just don't want it getting out. And that's the prohibitionists working behind the scenes. And that's the thing that's frustrating. Like here in Indiana, when they do the surveys, 5% of the population are prohibitionists. They're against cannabis in Indiana now because of the work that everyone has done, especially NORML. About 80 to 90% are pro cannabis at some form, whether it's medical to recreational. And then the other 5 to 15% don't care. They're like, what does it matter? It doesn't affect me. I don't care. It doesn't affect anybody I know that I'm aware of. So even though you have a super majority of people in Indiana, it's still not legalized
It's the opposite
because
here in New Jersey. 73% of the state is for cannabis in some way, shape, or form. Over 73%, and that's why it went to legalization, because they like put it up to us to vote for it, and that's why it passed. So like the government had no say in it not going legal because we all voted for recreational, industry ourselves. So it's like you got to do what you got to do. But damn, you guys are got a huge majority of people against it out there, huh?
no, 80 to 90% are for it, support it.
Yeah, but it's that 5%. That 5% of prohibitionists is still they've got more money than the other 80% of lobbying power, unfortunately. So they're the majority, unfortunately, but numbers I'd say otherwise. But yeah, I get what you're saying. It's a tough cookie to deal with when it comes to the certain circumstances of the underlying issues with those prohibitionists. They're sneaky for a reason.
Well, and I've talked to a lot of the politicians, and even the politicians what happens is the reason we're making progress in Indiana at the State House is, for example, Representative Linus. He, the last year that I heard him speak, he said, last year, there's no way in hell I'd vote for anything cannabis, not hemp, not medical, nothing. He said, I was a complete prohibitionist. My brother got cancer. And I saw how well it helped him, how much it helped him. And he said, now I'm willing to support cannabis moving forward. And
it takes it for it to hit close to home for them to really realize the actual benefits of it.
It does. And it's only one at a time. So, over 8 years, we went from probably about 5% of politicians in Indiana supporting it. So it's flipped. There's 5% that are prohibitionists in the population. There's 5% that were pro-cannabis at the State House when when we started, and as Republicans. And now a couple of years ago we're closer to 40, and everything kind of fell apart the last year or two. There's still movement. They're still trying to hold their own, but maybe after this election, things will be better. There was one of the elections. There was a northern agricultural Republican in the primary. He said, "I don't care if hemp is a cash cow for farmers." He said, "I'm against it. Period. I'm not supporting it. The farmers can just find another way," and there was no other way. And so what happened? Well, what happened is he lost his primary. But the problem is there's not too many contested primaries. A lot of times in Indiana, there's only one person in each party on the ballot. So the people don't have a choice of candidates. And I've encouraged people to run. And the problem with when you run as a pro-cannabis candidate and you're a Republican is Governor Holcomb, actually, I heard, told his county chairs not to sign any of the paperwork to allow pro-cannabis candidates on the ballot in the primary. Because the party controls who gets on the ballot for their party. And in Indiana, you essentially have three parties that you can get on the ballot. You have the Republicans, you have the Democrats, and you have the Libertarians. The Republicans shut down their candidates if they're pro cannabis candidates, they can't get on the ballot. The Democrats, the majority of them support that are candidates now. Libertarians, same way. Independents, it costs too much money to get on the ballot. Statewide, you need about $1 million, and there's just not people with that kind of money to run. But the Libertarians are starting to make inroads because the Republicans won't. They're not being Republicans. They're because Republicans are about small government, pro business, and freedoms. Well, in Indiana, they're not. They're regulating and taxing people. Like the first year that Governor Holcomb was in, they passed 46 new taxes. And the Republicans always say, well, the Democrats passed all these taxes and fines. Well, Indiana has been having a problem, and they collect too much money, so then they have to send the money back to the people. There's actually a constitutional amendment that requires them that they can only hold on to so much money, and then the rest of it has to go back to the people. Well, that process, you lose, 20-25% of that money in collecting it and then sending it back. So it would make more sense just not to collect the taxes. And that's part of the reason that Indiana said, well, we don't need cannabis because we don't need the money, because you're overtaxing people already. So if you're overtaxing people, so, and that's goes down another political rabbit hole with Indiana and the politicians. But as far as cannabis goes, they could use the money, and they could use for recreational. You tax recreational, medical should be free because they're patients, just like medication. They don't tax on medical services. They don't tax on medication. If cannabis is your medicine, it shouldn't be taxed. If you're using it recreationally, then yeah, it's like any other product. It can be taxed. So
Try explaining that to the politicians in New Jersey. They love taxing the sick patients. It's their fucking forte.
Yeah. Well,
My buddy, to put it this way, my buddy's a vet, so he should get discounts as a vet. He's a medical patient in the state, and he still pays taxes with a medical card. We're not supposed to pay taxes as a medical patient. Or reduced, rather, because it's supposed to be phased out by 5 years. And I think we're on year 3 or 2 or something like that. I'm not sure. Lefty might be able to chime in about that a little better than me. But they're supposed to phase out no taxes for medical patients by like a 5-year mark. I'm not sure if we've reached that mark yet or not, but he's paying taxes. So obviously, I don't think we've reached that 5-year mark of 0 taxes for patients yet. Have we, Lefty?
That or they haven't, they like collecting the taxes and they just haven't given it up yet. Sometimes they extend things and they don't tell us.
Yeah, that's how politicians operate. That's the way they do. Be sneaky, and then they do what they want. So this way you can't complain about it because you don't know.
Yeah, I, as a 100% disabled veteran, I've spent the last 10 years recovering from my deployments and from my military service, and I'm just getting to the point where I can walk again. I was on 4 inhalers, 4 medications for my lungs. I'm off all those. I had stage 3 kidney disease. I had migraines up to 20 a month, and the best the VA could do was 12, get me down to 12 on the medications. But then I had a hard time speaking and communicating. The first day that I got put on Neurontin, they put me on 300 milligrams 3 times a day, and I couldn't speak. It was brain fog, and so they told me, "Well, you failed everything for migraines. Just this is all we can do." So what ended up happening is I looked up herbals and I started adding herbals and added CBD, and I got down to 6. And then when I added medical marijuana and moved to Michigan and reduced my stress, then I've only had migraines if I go back to Indiana for too long and my stress is too high. And then I'd have 1 or 2 migraines a year. But when my stress is high, I don't get my supplements, and I don't have access to my cannabis, then that's when I'm vulnerable to, relapse. And I had irritable bowel and GERD. I used to have up to 13 liquid bowel movements a day. And all that's gone. It's gone. And the medical community, they couldn't really help me. I had to do this on my own as a healthcare professional and do the research and talk to people. And it took, well, I've been dealing with health issues since like 97. And most of those are under control currently because of the regimen that I have, which is exercise, a diet, and then the supplements and herbals, and reduce stress. So it's cannabis is part of the solution. It's not the solution, because a lot of people say, "Oh, it does everything." It does help a lot of things because your endocannabinoid system regulates everything. It keeps you in homeostasis. So if something's out of whack, it balances it out to the best it can. But you still need other things to, so you can produce the enzyme, so that the system can say, "Oh, we need more of this enzyme." So you need the nutrition to do it. So most of us in America are fed horrible diets, high in salt, high in sugar, and you need a balance of healthy fats, protein, and a lot less carbs than what we're getting, because that's why we're all have that beer belly gut. And it it's a matter.
Also, because I get a lot of munchies.
Yes, well, actually, they've shown that people who use marijuana tend to be thinner, have a lower BMI than people who don't. So even though you're getting the munchies, you're burning. The reason you're getting the munchies is because you're dropping your blood sugar. When you're dropping your blood sugar, you're using those carbs up. Cannabis makes you burn the carbs. Not that you should go out and eat a whole bunch of candy and cake, because there's no nutritional value to it. And, if you're burning carbs, you might as well burn healthy carbs like fruits and vegetables. And and I use a protein shake, but you gotta be, you gotta find one that's
Crazy feedback.
yeah. So
Actually, I got to step out, so I'll be back in a minute, guys.
and I know my wife had hundreds of patients that she helped. We had this one lady, I remember, she came in and her pain doctor said, "I'm done with you. Nothing else I can do. Here's your script." And she was on her medication. She was at a 9 out of 10 pain. And she came in crying, and we dosed her with, it would have been like 100 milligrams of CBD. We started talking to her, listening to her. And in about 15 to 20 minutes, she's like, "Oh my gosh, my pain's a 5 out of 10." She said, "I can live with this. The healthcare community gave up on me. They couldn't get my pain under control. And I walk in here, and within less than half an hour, you have my pain under at a manageable level for me." And so, I see those patients. Shelly had a meth addict who she used CBD to get her off the meth. And the drug addiction center, she popped positive for marijuana. We don't know if she was using it or not, but she was the only person that Shelly had in the 7 years that popped positive for cannabis or marijuana, THC. And so, but the drug addiction clinic worked with her, and they said, "Well, we're gonna have to go 1 week without you getting your medication for the meth, Suboxone. Um, so what ended up happening was she was just on CBD, and it worked so well that she didn't go back. Uh, so it's these little victories. Each person that has a victory moves us forward, and everybody's story is important. And this is something back in 2016. I got contacted by attorneys and businesses in Colorado and California, and they said, we see the work that you're doing, and you're a healthcare professional. What do you think is going to make it the biggest impact? I said, getting people's stories out there. There was a gal in Colorado. I went to the dispensary. She walked outside. We did a video and I posted on Indiana Normal years ago. And she said, I was in a car accident. I was either in so much pain I couldn't get out of bed, or I was so medicated with the opioids that I couldn't get out of bed. And she found that medical cannabis allowed her to get out of bed and function and not be on the opioids. And she got her life back. She said, as long as I have medical cannabis, I can drive, I can work. She got off of, she was, I think, 18 or to 20 years old when she got into the car wreck. And um, she was on SSDI. So the government was giving her money to live on, but she went back to college. She's working, all because of cannabis. And, they talk about our SSDI, our Medicare, our retirement benefits are at risk because people are too sick and they're drawing, and the money's going out faster than it's coming in. I think that's changed now. But if you allow people to get healthy, then they can go back to work and they can now be paying into the system instead of pulling out. And I know the government in the 80s mismanaged Social Security and Medicare. They borrowed from it, which is part of the reason we don't have any money or part of the reason we're having trouble now with it, because they're like, oh, all the baby boomers are still working. Well, when the baby boomers start retiring in 15, 20 years after that, the 80s, then now they're finding that they're having problems. But the nice thing is, my son's generation, there are more of them, so they're contributing money in that kind of bolsters the system. So we'll have another crisis because they're not having as many kids. But cannabis plays a role in some of those economic solutions and allowing people to work and be healthier. So the government's not spending as much on healthcare. People aren't spending as much on healthcare. They have more money to spend in the system. And when you're spending in the system, you're getting taxes, because healthcare doesn't get taxes. We actually supplement the healthcare systems a lot of times. And I think our healthcare system's broke, to be honest. And there's a lot of issues. And since we're having so many problems with just the simple stuff, blood pressure, headaches, breathing issues, all these things, cannabis can help. And I mean, I've seen it, I've experienced it firsthand. I've seen it with friends and family, and with Shelly's customers, and I know it takes individuals stepping up, telling their stories, to push the politicians, and voting. This is an election year, and you have to vote for people who don't just say that they support cannabis. Like President Trump said, oh, I'll support medical cannabis in his first election. But then he appoints Sessions, who's the biggest prohibitionist at the federal level that we've had in the Senate forever, as the Attorney General, which contradicts exactly what he said. And then, Trump said two different things in the last couple months. He said, he goes, oh, the Republican Party needs to become prohibitionist party again. And then he turns around and says, well, I support recreational, Florida ballot initiative for amendment to legalize in Florida. You can't walk both sides. You gotta pick one or the other. Having talking points for one state like Florida, because it's a swing state, um, saying that, oh, I support recreational here, but for the rest of the country, the Republican Party needs to make it illegal. It, that doesn't help. And I know uh, the Biden administration, they did some things. They pushed the DEA and FDA to look at reclassifying cannabis, which is a good thing. It doesn't go far enough. And then, pardoning the federal marijuana convictions. Well, that's great, but what about the states? Well, that's each governor. And the only way you solve that is by changing the law, which is what Congress needs to do. And so it's until the federal government fixes the problem, we're going to be struggling. And each state, like I can live in Michigan and I'm fine. But then I got to think about, well, what if I need to go to Indiana for something? What if I go to Utah or, can I get my medical cannabis? I know Hawaii, you pay $50 if you got a medical card from another state and you can use there. Well, not every state's like that, even though they're supposed to under the Constitution. That's why you have a driver's license in Indiana or Michigan, and you can drive in any 50 states because of the Constitution. It's supposed to be if you have a license, they're all supposed to reciprocate. So if you have a nursing license, like I have a nursing license from Indiana, I got my Ohio license. There's a few additional requirements that I had to do education. Same thing for doctors. You can take your doctor's license to any state. You might have to take a class or two and pay the registration. But it would be nice that if doctors and nurses could just move from state to state and not have to worry about jumping through hoops. There's just one standard and you meet it. The same thing with the medical marijuana card. You have one standard, you meet it. It would, but you have to convince the federal government that one, it needs to be legalized. Two, all of it, and then two, it really shouldn't be classified unless it's in its own classification. Like they're talking about class 6, which is essentially treating it like corn or any other plant, but still keeping it so that it's regulated and tested, which I think can work if they do it right. That's something that some of the researchers, I think, I don't want to get his name wrong, but there's researchers that I've been talking to, and descheduling it altogether doesn't really solve our problems either. Because if you just deschedule it and it's not regulated and the product's not tested, then you have issues. And that's my friend Will Henry has been working with the USDA, and we're finding out that the government doesn't test. What they do is they farm it out. So the businesses will test a product and then give it the report to the federal government, the USDA or the FDA, and they accept it without checking. And who knows if that laboratory is honest or not. And it's the problem that they've had with a lot of products here recently, including cannabis, is which I think they're starting to fix, is that when they test it, if you pay a little extra, you can change your values. One of the things, I don't know if you remember, they had eye drops that were produced in India, and people had gone blind and were getting infections, and the FDA had the right to go over and inspect. They didn't. I think it was Forbes or the Wall Street Journal sent a reporter over. He went in. People were barefoot on a dirt floor. They weren't wearing masks. They were putting the eye drop solution in, and then they had computers with printers, and they were just printing off no lab testing. They just were printing off acceptable lab values and shipping it. And there was no testing done. It was people were getting sick, losing their eyesight.
Wow.
We can't have that. Cannabis is my stepson got sick for 6 months because they ignored the testing. They knew the product was bad. The judge said send it out on the market anyways against the Michigan Regulatory Agency, Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency. They pulled it, and the judge says no, put it back. So it gets these are the issues that we have, and then the prohibition's like, look, see, it was bad. No, the judge was the one. The corporation suing, the judge saying yes, let it. He saw it. It was the government that acted incorrectly, not the executive branch, not the legislative branch, but the judicial branch. The judicial branch is the easiest to abuse because you get somebody in there, if they don't like something, they can make something look bad, and they have things called judicial precedents, which there's no law, nothing in the Constitution. It's just a judge who decides, I want this to be the way it is. So they make a rule, and they have complete control, and they're the ones that interpret all the laws. So they interpret the laws and they regulate the enforcement. So if the executive branch enforces something and the judge says, no, that shouldn't be enforced, it's not constitutional, or I don't agree with it, then it's done. So if you have bad judges, and they're in there a lot of times for life. I mean, there's some that are elected, but when you get higher up, they're there for life. Like Indiana, they're there for 10 years, and then they go and get voted. And nobody knows who the judges are. So when they see, oh, should we retain the person? It's always 2/3 yes, 1/3 no, because nobody knows them. And the US Supreme Court, I think my brother was telling me, there's like 40, 50 cases one year. And there are thousands or even maybe 10 or 20,000 cases that go before. So essentially the US Supreme Court is closed to the American public. It's only there seeing people who have the money to hire the expensive attorneys or law firms that deal with it. And then you have to put on special paper and do it and pay different fees. And so essentially the branch of government that's supposed to be protecting us, giving us justice, is closed to the American people for the issues that matter the most. And it's like you were saying before, even though the 5% are prohibitionists, most of them are the ones with the money. And because they have money, they essentially, either through campaign donations or behind the scenes, they donate to the politicians and the judges, and they get what they want when they want it. And if they get caught using marijuana, a lot of times it's like, oh, don't do it again. Oh, we understand you had a health problem. Well, so does almost every American have a health. Everybody will have a health problem at some point that can probably be helped by cannabis in their life. And if
It's
only the people are connected, have access, then that's not justice. That's not freedom.
it's scary when one person has a lot of power and holds up things. There's one state senator here in New Jersey, the Senate president, who will not allow the home grow bill for a vote. He won't allow the home grow bill even for a hearing. We can't even have a hearing on this. He's holding it up. One person.
Yep. Same in Indiana. It just takes one. And the governor, when a bill gets to the governor, it was more difficult to get the bill to the governor than it would be for the governor to veto it and send it back. It's easier Indiana has the weakest governor veto in the country. It's simple majority. So if you got it there, you can overturn his veto. It's just that he's saying, I don't like the bill, and he's hoping to sway somebody. But the swaying was done while the bill was going through. He's talking to people at the top to do exactly what you're talking about, because his veto means nothing here except for the governor saying, "Yeah, I don't like it." so, yeah.
Well, this is amazing to hear what's going on there in Indiana and the fight that you have and that you've been fighting. It's amazing. That's a tough state, man. I know. I got a couple of questions for you. These are fun questions. These are more lighthearted before I let you go. This is kind of cool. The first time you smoked cannabis, how old were you, and is there a story behind it?
First time I smoked cannabis was let's see here. I was in Colorado. I went on a trip. I went to Colorado. I was I think 44.
Wow, 44.
Yeah, never used. And that was one of the things I got attacked in Indiana for. They said, "Oh, you don't know about marijuana because you don't use." I said, "Well, I went to Colorado. I learned about it. I know now." And because they were saying, "Oh, well, you don't know about marijuana. You've never used it." I knew the book. I knew the academic. And then I went to Colorado, I used, and I stopped. I got off all my medications, all of them, while I
Yeah,
was spent a month out west. So yeah, they attack you whether they attack you because you don't use. They attack you if you use. Oh, you're a stoner if you use. If you don't use and you don't know anything, and it's like, but I caught them. I said I don't use. But I did for a month, and I saw the medical benefits. I got off everything, all my medications
yeah,
for
me
a
too.
month.
I got you were on gabapentin. I get off gabapentin. I get off Neurontin. I get off Lyrica, Valium, OxyContin. I get off all that stuff.
I got off 13 medications completely.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's only anecdotal, I know, but hey, there's two of us now.
Well, no, anecdotal
2 million of us. 2 million of us.
it's actually like a case study. One
Yeah,
person, that's a case study. Anecdotal is, well, I've used something and I feel, but when there's evidence that, oh, you got off all these medications and you're better, that's a case study. That's one step above anecdotal.
yeah, for sure. Um, so the first time you did use, how did you feel? What was this? What was it? What was it like? You went to a dispensary?
Um, yeah, I got some. The first time I really didn't notice anything,
You didn't
but
get
people,
stoned?
I I couldn't tell because I didn't use a whole lot. It was just people said you're happier, you're more relaxed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool.
Now, now I've been really stoned. Like Shelly had me stoned for 36 hours, where I couldn't get out of bed, and all I could do is she called it Joker face, and she'd come in, she'd just laugh, and
Those are
and
fun.
yeah, well, she gave me food and gave me CBD and checked on me and gave me water, and it eventually it wore off.
Right. Okay. The second question is, what's your favorite munchie food?
Oh, well, I like I like fruit. So when I have the munchies, I eat some grapes or oranges or apples. Um, that that's what I tend to eat.
Nice. I've heard that before. I heard we interviewed a farmer, and the farmer's favorite munchie food was whatever is in harvest right at that time. I was like, oh, that's cool. That's amazing. um, one last question: if you have a friend who's down and out, sad, depressed, what's something you would say to cheer him up, or something that's maybe got you through a tough time? Maybe a quote or something that's got you something uplifting.
Well, whenever I get really down, because I've had suicidal ideations. I look for the good in life, whether it was my grandfather, my kids. I try to find something in my life that brings joy to me. So what I would tell somebody is I'd ask them, what brings joy to your life? Okay, let's talk about that. Because when you start talking about joy, it changes the chemicals in your brain. than talking about the depression. Once you start feeling better, then you can talk about the whatever is causing you to be depressed or suicidal. And my wife always smoked a joint with somebody while she was talking to them, which brought more joy.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. See, I need certain terps for my back. I have a lot of back pain. I know if you have PTSD, there's certain terps that you don't want, certain strains you don't want. You don't want a sativa with everybody's different, but most of the time you don't want a sativa that's going to make your mind race if you have PTSD. You want something more mellow. For me, I like the real cheesy kind of strains, the real gassy strains. They seem to help me the most, the indica strains. And I use a lot of dabs for my pain. Also, I have an artificial disc. I have a Fusion L5S1, L4L5. I have a 2-level cervical. By the way, this 2-level cervical I had without any opiates. I just used cannabis oil and suppositories and edibles. 0 opiates for 2-level. And I was amazed. I didn't think cannabis could do that, but it did.
Yeah, Shelley had a cervical fusion. She had a plate, 8 screws, stem cells, and she needed her lower back worked on too. And all she did, well, in the hospital they wouldn't give her anything, and she couldn't take opioids, so she did Motrin and ice. Shelley had an incredible pain tolerance. The only pain she couldn't control with cannabis was the blood clots. And we got her on opioids. And they didn't want to treat her. And they finally got her on fentanyl patches, and that was kind of working. But then she slept all the time. So because they refused to treat the blood clots, and initially they were refusing to give her pain meds because she's on opioids, or because she was on cannabis, they wouldn't give her the opioids. And eventually even Dr. Vrula was having problems getting her pain med because they didn't want to prescribe to her. They wanted to prescribe, but they didn't want to dispense. Our system needs to understand that cannabis and opioids can work together to control pain, especially for cancer patients and people who have blood clots. But it takes an expert like myself to manage, and you got to know the patient. It's not like, well, I think that's part of the problem is we lost that continuity. You just go in to a doctor and you see a different doctor every time. Well, you never really, they don't know you, so all they're looking at is numbers, and they can't see because there's a soapy note. There's a subjective, objective, the oh gosh, I want to say application and then the plan. Oh, assessment and then plan. So subjective is whatever they tell you, and then objective is the labs, the vital signs, and then the assessment is your hands-on, what you see when you're looking at the patient. And then the plan is what you're going to do. Well, if you have a new provider each time, there's no consistency with the plan, and you kind of lose some of the subjective over time because it's different reading a paper and looking at a person. Because I can look at you and learn a lot more from you at that point in time, and then it's in the back of my mind. Next time I see you, oh, do you look better? Or do you look worse? Or do you look the same? Well, if they never saw you before and all they're looking at is a paper, all they can see is the objective, the facts, not that intuition that people get from seeing the same person over and over and over again. Sometimes you find, another provider might be better for you, but I think continuity is important too. And our healthcare system lacks that a lot of times.
Yeah, there's a guy that's going around, a couple of companies. They take your DNA test and they can figure out your terp profile and they can figure out your cannabis absorption rate from your DNA test. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you had a 25-fold difference between people and how they process cannabis. That's why 1 to 5 milligrams of THC can get me high, where it took sometimes up to 400. Shelley even took 1,000 once, trying to treat her pain with the blood clots. It just cannabis wasn't effective for her blood clot pain, but she had severe blood clots. They were surprised she didn't die when they originally found the first one. It was probably about 2.5 feet long in her leg.
Oh,
Yeah, if it would have gotten through, it would have killed her. The first one, but but yeah. So you, knowing the facts, the objective of where you are and how fast you can absorb it, how do you process it? Because the better you process it, the higher you get, and the less you need. The less you process, the more you need, because when your liver changes it from delta 9 to the delta 11 hydroxy compound, then it's 10 times stronger than just delta 9. So when you inhale it, you're missing that liver, that first pass. So it takes more from smoking than it does from edibles to get high. And edibles are a little more unpredictable too, depending on what they're in and how you absorb it. And usually, and for some of the terpenes, you need to make sure there's lectin in it so that it'll help absorb into your bloodstream. Because if you don't have that that carrier oil from a plant, then you don't absorb the terpenes like you should. And for me, Gorilla Glue, number 4, Platinum Delight, were all great for my pain and my migraines. They worked really good. And I know some people, and that worked really good for Shelley too. But Shelley also liked when she wanted to get something done. She liked she liked the strawberry bubbles and smoothie, and she liked the runts. But
Paco's munching
By
out on some edibles.
gummies, but I also want to chime in about GG4. GG4 is the only strain that works for my chronic pain. I have similar injuries to Lefty in regards to my neck, herniated disc, spines, fusion, and then as well as my lower spine. The last 3 joints in my spine are completely dry rotted, causing neuropathy and pain down my legs. GG4, among a few other strains, like a handful, work for my pain to the point where it literally just takes it all out better than opiates. And that's Gorilla Glue number 4.
well, the thing is, like Shelley had a friend who grew, and one of the strains she grew was GG4, and she's a patient caregiver. Absolutely best cannabis I've had anywhere. We have another friend who grows, and his GG4 was good, but not as good as her other friend. And what we do is we mix them so that you kind of get a balance between the two. And that worked really good for Shelley most of the time. And the Volcano, the best way to inhale. Well, dabs, if you need dabs, then you got to do that. But Volcano works a lot better because then you can control the carcinogenic. You're not burning your medicine, you're vaporizing it. Just like they do with albuterol. It vaporizes into a bag. You breathe it in, or a mask. And I remember they said, "Oh well, marijuana vapor causes irritation to the lungs." It's like if you overuse it in the initial phases, it actually works as a bronchodilator, just like an inhaler. And when I was working in the ICU and I worked with vent patients and they were having problems, we would use the maximum amount of albuterol or the steroids. And then I said, well, can't we use more? They said, no, if you use more, it's going to harm them. It's going to do more harm than good. It'll have a reverse effect. And they said, so we got to do other things like pulmonary toileting, where you turn them, beat on their back, You suction them out. So medicine is one solution, but there are always additional things, and you can only use so much, and then you start harming them with the medication that you're using. It's no longer beneficial; it's harmful. And it's the same thing when you use the Afrin. It's essentially vasopressin. You spray it up your nose. You can use it for a few days. I think max like 4 to 6 sprays. But once you start using more than that, then it causes it to get stuffed up, and because vasopressin constricts the blood vessels, the capillaries. So if you got a nosebleed, it works really good at stopping nosebleeds. But the thing is, then you've got to stop. You use menthol, use Vicks to open up your airways. Use the Neely flush to rinse everything out, because there's something up there irritating it. I mean, you might have to use that with the Afrin too. But so everything has a range of how much to use and how often. Nothing is a cure-all. There's added benefits to adding other treatments and therapies onto it to get to your optimal value. Like I go to the chiropractor. Cannabis doesn't adjust my spine. So I exercise, which stabilizes the muscles and builds the tendons and ligaments. Then I stretch, and then which allows easier adjustment, and it prevents pinching of the nerves. And then I go to the chiropractor who adjusts me, and I take medication. Well, I take cannabis to help with the pain, or I take other herbs that help reduce the inflammation. And I try to avoid Motrin and Tylenol because I have kidney issues, and they affect your kidneys. So, and naproxen does too. They told me never to take naproxen again because of my kidney insult that I have. So,
I know I have a really bad neuropathy, and cannabis does not help with neuropathy. It just doesn't. I haven't found one that has. Anyway,
have you tried putting using as an oil and rubbing it on the area with the neuropathy, using a CBD and marijuana
I had luck with
extract
those
oil?
patches, Paco. Those patches, actually. Yeah, the CBD patch. Yeah, those were helpful.
Yeah. Neuropathy is just your nerve. So your nerve gets damaged, and what helps the nerve heal is cannabis. You need vitamin D to help absorb the magnesium. They found out with multiple sclerosis, 78% of multiple sclerosis is caused from, this is I think a Scottish study or a British study, caused from lack of magnesium. They thought it was vitamin D, but the reason vitamin D was connected is because vitamin D helps you get your magnesium into your body. So if your vitamin D is low, you're not absorbing your magnesium, and magnesium is used to help stabilize the nerve conduction so that the myelin sheath doesn't deteriorate. Is one of the things. And then omega-3s, which are precursors to cannabinoids, are endocannabinoids. But the liver also detoxes. So as you detox the toxins that might be irritating your nerves, it might help your neuropathy too. So the vitamin D, you want your vitamin D levels. I try to keep my vitamin D levels between 50 and 90. And they tell you, so 30 and below, you treat rickets. So, if you're below 30, it's a sign that you have increased risk for cancer. At 50, well, 30 and above, if you're below 30, then you could develop rickets. So 30 and above, you treat rickets. 50 and above, actually found for vitamin D, it is good for preventing MS in patients. But vitamin D is used in so many things in our body that, and you get it from the sun. The problem is, a lot of places, when they started using sunscreen, then you're not getting vitamin D. You're not making it. It's like wearing clothing. If you're always clothed, then you don't make vitamin D. And they found that if you get a sunburn, when you have sunscreen on, it's worse than if you get a sunburn without sunscreen because your body produces vitamin D, which fights the cancer and the damage that the sun would have caused. So you got a built-in mechanism. And I think there was a European study. They checked 36 different sunscreens. Only one was non-spermogenic. Only one of them didn't harm your sperm. I don't know if spermogenic is right, but only one of the 36 sunscreens didn't affect male sperm.
Spermicidal?
But they didn't tell you which one. So most likely the sunscreen that everybody's putting on has a negative health effect for men. So you know, they try to solve one solution, let you be out in the sun longer, but they cause other problems. And they don't tell people. There's a study out there you got to look and find, and who knows if the study was done right. Maybe there was something else that was going on that affected sperm. Who knows? And that's the thing. It's hard to know by just reading. You have to have a group of scientists that are trustworthy to go over it. And for myself, it really is difficult to trust our government. It's hard to trust research. Because the Rocky Mountain High Association, which does all the cannabis research, they were doing things that to prove that cannabis, their funding was to prove cannabis was harmful. And so, if they find a negative thing, well, that they're looking for it. And after, gosh, they've been looking for harmful effects of cannabis since the 70s. They really haven't found a whole lot. It's a lot safer than any pharmaceutical that we have. They've actually, since it's caused no death, water causes a death in the United States every year or two from drinking too much. I mean, so essentially cannabis is can be safer than water. And water is essential for life. And it's even safer than oxygen because if you get up, because when I worked with Vince, we always try to get them to 30% oxygen because anything over that causes damage long term to the lungs. So, it's so marijuana is looking to be no more harmful than water or oxygen.
Yep.
It's like,
I actually got into it with the doctors the other day.
Yeah.
Over cannabis. They were trying to treat me. I had gone to the hospital not long ago, and they were trying to treat me for cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. And I said, that's not what I have. They're like, no, you have that. And I'm like, I can promise you that's not what I have. Now, I was complaining of nausea, upset stomach, stomach pain, as well as intestinal pain, and as well as irregular bowel movements to the point where I was also throwing up with nausea and sweating. So like, now you got it. And I'm like, no, I don't. I was like, I can promise you I don't. I've been smoking 23 years. 20, probably longer than most. You've been a doctor. Like I was telling them in ER, I was like, longer than you've been a doctor. I was like, just take me to the MRI, get an MRI of my stomach because I had gastric bypass surgery. Possibly it could have ruptured and opened up. Like, let's just check that instead. Like, no, you have cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. I'm like, stop trying to diagnose me for that. I literally can smoke circles around most regular recreational users that you think I am. Please trust. I'm a medical patient for well over 12 years. Recreational 23 plus. So it's like, when I told him that, he was like, jaw drop. Didn't understand that it was a feasible thing for a medical patient to ingest that much. I'm like, yeah. It's like, it keeps me off of opiates. What do you mean? And then what ended up happening was what happened with me was, with its instance, was I was taking too much RSO mixed with coconut oil. So the coconut oil was causing disruption inside of my gastrointestinal tract to the point where it couldn't form bowel and it was having irregular bowel movements to the point where it just wasn't forming stool. And I got sick from that to the point where I was constant cramping, like literally cramping entire, most of the gastrointestinal tract was just cramping because of the fact that it didn't know what was going on. I went back and I told the doctor, I was like, this is what it was. I stopped the coconut oil and I'm fine now. And he was like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah. Who would have thought?
See,
Too much coconut
Shelly
oil,
and
like I told you from the beginning.
I had an incident like that. We stopped at a Long John Silver's and A&W combo, and we had one meal. We shared it. We ate it. By the time we got to Michigan, we were both sick. And I just took a little Zofran, and it resolved my issue. Shelly went in and she said, I'm a medical marijuana user, and these, oh, well, you have cannabis hyperemesis. And she's like, no, I don't think that's it. I think I have food poisoning. My husband and I ate a meal about 5 or 6 hours ago. We both got sick. He had a blowout, and he took a little Zofran, and he's good. I need something to control my nausea. Oh, no, no. And they treated her for cannabis hyperemesis, which the treatment for cannabis hyperemesis treats the nausea for food poisoning. And they rehydrated her and gave her some electrolytes. And they're like, but they didn't treat her for the food poisoning. There's a regimen that you're supposed to do. They sent her home. She came back sick again. And Shelly has had chronic cyclic vomiting syndrome her whole life. So she needed something, and she'd be in and out of the hospital, and then cannabis resolved that, where she didn't have that issue. So the medical people don't want to listen. And we're both nurses. I'm a retired trauma nurse, educator, and was a former ICU nurse and float nurse. So it's not like they're talking to a layperson. We explain to them exactly what's going on, what we suspect, what we had, and they're like, no, no, you don't know. I'm like, well, what's your experience? I mean, I've been in healthcare longer than most of the new doctors have been alive. so,
See,
and I train doctors. I train
right.
with policies and procedures and education. And now I advise University of Michigan anesthesiology department on cannabis with pain treatment. It's like they think I don't. They're like, you don't know about cannabis. I'm like, I don't know about cannabis. I work with the University of Michigan's anesthesiology department. Where do you get your training? Who do you work with?
Yeah.
And I work with doctors all over the world, researchers. And well, I got a medical degree.
Dude, that was the funniest
Okay.
part because I was at the hospital, and because I told you before, my sister's a cardiologist, she's a DO. So obviously I had her on FaceTime, and she was literally explaining to him, no, my brother does not have that syndrome. He smokes way too much to have that syndrome as a medical patient, I promise you. And he was like, oh, what do you mean? He has to have it. I'm like, no, dude, it's the coconut oil. It's literally not forming, and it's causing me to dehydrate to a point where I'm literally dehydrated. 2 bags of IV, Tylenol 700 milligram, and I think they gave me some sort of anti-nausea medication that I didn't even remember the name of. Walked out of there fine, no problem. Eating crackers, drinking down ginger ales, and they're like, wow. I'm like, yeah, I need a hot shower. What do you know? Wow, mind blown. Oh, medical mystery.
So cannabis hyperemesis, there's two ways to indicate that it may be that way. So long-time user, well, the first thing is long-time user. That's the first indication on their schematic. Then,
So they say.
if you put cathation on the belly and it relieves it, that is an indication it could be, or a hot shower improves it. If a hot shower makes you feel more nauseous, it is not cannabis hyperemesis most of
That's
the
what I
time.
thought. That's what I first thought when it first started happening with my symptoms. So I said, let me take a hot shower and relieve this. I got more nauseous to the point where I almost passed out in the shower from the steam and the hot water. I'm like, no, this is not working. I need a cold shower. Blasted the cold and I was fine. I'm like, yeah, I was throwing off my nervous system because something else was wrong with my gut.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing is they don't want to listen.
No.
It's just like when Shelly and I had food poisoning. They didn't want to listen to us that, oh, well, you can get food poisoning. gosh, I had scallop. We were the last customers at a hibachi grill, and I ordered scallops, and oh, I was so sick.
That's a bad
But
idea. At the end of the day, the scallops sitting all day. Ooh, they got to get rid of them. So it's never a good
yeah,
idea.
yeah. So I knew it wasn't cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. It's but so I stayed
You
at
don't want to
home. I
hear
took
it.
some Zofran, hydrated. It you know I there are times you have to go in, and I'm getting to the point where I don't like going in because they don't listen. They don't follow the evidence. They have preconceived notions in their mind of
How it should
what's
go.
wrong with you if you are a cannabis user.
And you know what
And
it was? I was literally in the middle of the ER in this pain, gut wrenching pain. I got up, rolled a blunt. They're like, "You can't do that in here." And I'm like, "Stop me." I rolled my blunt, walked to the ambulance bay where the ambulances were backing up to the ER, and I smoked my blunt while people were being admitted. And I'm like, "Yep, hello. I'm medicating because it makes me feel better." The doctors are watching me like, "You can't do that." And I'm like, "Stop me. Give me a ticket, please. I would love for you to do this as a medical patient. I'm dying for you to do so. Because so I can have proof that you guys are not allowing me to medicate to live the better quality of life I need to right now with this nausea." And they weren't hearing it, And I'm like, "Yep, stop me. Go ahead." Security's like, "Please stop it." I'm like, "Go ahead, stop me. Take it out of my mouth and stop me." They didn't do anything.
yeah, well,
Oh,
they don't know what to do because they,
they're mind blown. Old. It was an
they
old dude. It was an older doctor, to be honest.
yeah, well, and that's the vascular surgeon was an older guy who refused to treat Shelley for the blood clot because she used cannabis. The medical oncologist they're okay with it. Um, they they couldn't even get the medications right. They told so yeah, I was going through. It's just frustrating having been in the system so long and seeing the ignorance and the bias, and the only way to get through it is to one, change the law, but even that doesn't change the bias. It's two, to start teaching in the medical schools. Until they start teaching, like the American Nurses Association has approved the cannabinoid nurses certification. So you'll have letters after your name if you get certified as a cannabis nurse. Well, so I posted that, put the link on. So American Cannabis Nurse Association, they are the authority for nurses and certification and education and policies in the country. That's it, American Nurse Association. Well, Facebook said that it was misleading and misinforming that they're from their fact checkers, they're experts. I'm like, so you're telling me that the experts are wrong about
It's because they're biased
their
about
policy,
medical use.
and so they blocked it. I'm like, they took it down. They took down. I'm like, you're taking down a link from the American Nurses Association saying that the American Nurses Association doesn't know about nursing. I'm like, that right there tells me that the bias is so strong that even when the experts in a healthcare profession post a policy about cannabis, Facebook will take it down saying that it's not right.
I bet if it was
It's
doctors, they
not
would have left
factual.
it up. If it was doctors,
No,
they probably would have left it up. You think?
no, I've had doctors post things and they've taken those stuff down too.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah,
Instagram is pretty bad with that too. It's like infamous for like going
yeah,
around and like targeting people in the cannabis industry, whether it's a patient, whether it's manufacturer, no matter what it is, you can't do anything, no matter what, on Instagram. It's pretty bad.
yeah.
The censorship is crazy.
It is. I posted legislation like from the U.S. Congress links talking about it, and Facebook has taken down saying, well, that's unapproved. Uh, that goes against community standards.
Guidelines, yeah.
And like congressional legislation goes against your community standards. I'm like, how is that? How does that make any sense whatsoever? When you start censoring the people when it comes to how the government works and what they're talking about and who's talking about what as a representative or senator, that's we actually have a word for that. That that it's censorship. That's what the communists do. That's what authoritarian governments do. That's what
Like New Jersey.
fascists do. The
New
Nazis
Jersey just did
do.
that. New Jersey just did the same thing where they just passed a bill where you're not allowed. What is it called, Lefty? The FAFSA bill? No, not FAFSA bill. The bill for the open policy, open door act, or whatever it's called, where they talk about about policies openly, where you can request information at hearings and stuff. Forgot what it's called where they block that.
Open public meetings. Yeah, they made
You're
it
not allowed
hard
to find out anything about what the politicians are doing. So if it's behind closed doors, you can't find out about it in New Jersey anymore. You can't legally look into it legally.
Yeah, there's federal laws for that, but then again, you have to get the courts, and you have to have money, and you have to get it. Most people have to get an attorney, unless they go through and learn all the laws and procedures. So it is. It's just nonsense. What they're doing, I'm finding that our politicians more and more, they just want to have power. They don't want people to have freedom. They want people to just do what we tell you to do and live your little life and struggle day by day, because they're going to find ways to take our money, whether it's through taxation or fines or making us use the courts to waste our time and money, and then rarely have a resolution. They'll give one every once in a while to us where we win, but yeah. Well, it was good talking to you guys.
Captain Strohs, do you have a website or something you want to promote?
Well, when my wife was alive, we were working on Facebook on Healing Green with Jason and Shelley. We posted recipes on there and stuff we were doing and the battles but I would say anybody who truly wants to get involved, I was involved in Normal in Indiana, and we were effective, and Normal tends to do a decent job at the national level. There's the Americans for Safe Access, who focuses more on the medical side. So Normal's more on the recreational or for everything, and then the Americans for Safe Access tends to do a lot for the medical side. And then any medical professional or anybody who likes to grow should look at the CanaMed conference, which is held it's usually held in May. And then for nurses, there's the American Cannabis Nurses Association. So I've kind of, since my wife got sick, I kind of stepped back this last year, so I'm just starting to get my wheels going again. So I appreciate you guys having me on and letting me speak and having some great questions and great stories. It's the stories like yours that really can have an impact. People just have to decide what's priority in their life. And for people like us, cannabis has been a priority because it's allowed us to have a better quality of life.
At the end of our podcast, we have a list of our friends and family who are not with us anymore. Either we're cannabis patients or we're waiting to become cannabis patients. Give us a minute. We'll go through our list real quick before you go. It usually brings it all back home. It's pretty sad. It's hope. It's hurtful. Sometimes it's hopeful. Sometimes it's helpful. It's always changing. But let me just thank a few people first. I want to thank CMMRJ, Canasense, UFCW, JacksonStorms.com, Smoking Monkey, Arlo Glass, OprahMachine.com, Mad Hatter Dispo, where we're at right here, and SativaCross.org. Our list begins with Cheryl Miller. She had multiple sclerosis, and Jim Miller pushed her across the state in her wheelchair to prove a point, and she got arrested in Washington using cannabis back in the 90s, and she was a trooper, and she opened my eyes to medical cannabis. I didn't know anything about medical cannabis till I saw Cheryl and how it helped her multiple sclerosis, where she was so rigid she couldn't move, and she would take her medical cannabis, and then all of a sudden she could be exercised, and Jim would be able to move her arms so she could stretch and all that. And I was amazed when I saw that, and that began my journey with activism and opened my eyes. Sabina Rose, 15-month-old baby, had a 25-hour seizure. Diane, Gracie, Cindy Mae, Marie, Jack, Joan, Randy, Polly, Bill, Chad, Jeremy, Colette, Matt, Troy, Russ, Roger, Jay, Ella, Hattie, Jackie, Anthony, Jake, Armando, Felicia, Lynn, Dan, Sean, Joyce, Lori, Frank, Brian, Flo, Carl, Thorne, Frank, Lorraine, Terry, Charlotte, Cher, Jaybird, Michael, Marley, Colette, Brendan, Red, Rico, Lulu, Becky, Lawanda, Chip, Paul, Lisa, Marcus, Gary, Jeff, and we'd like to, with your permission, add Shelly to this list, if that's okay.
That'd be okay.
So we're going to add Shelly to this list. And then we end our show with something that was written 100 years ago. And it helps us with activism. It was written during World War I, but it has to do with activism as well. And it goes like this. You probably heard it before. I used to hear this at rugby games, and I always wondered what this was, and I found out it's called the Ode of Remembrance. You ever hear of the Ode of Remembrance?
I probably have, but I need to hear it.
Okay. It goes like this. It's very long, and these are only 2 stanzas from it. It's like the 4th and 5th stanza. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. And that's how we end our show. So thank you, Captain Jason Straw. You're amazing. That was very informative.
Thank you. It was wonderful to have this conversation and show with you guys.
Awesome, bro. You have a wonderful night. Taco, Bear, everybody, have a great night. And
All right, brother.
We'll see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, have a good night. Get home safe, Lefty.
You too. Well, yeah, you're home. See you later.
Yeah.